Cool. We're live. So let me see if I can come down here. I want to mute this. Is it going? We are live. It's just not letting me see. There we go. Okay. Cool. Bear with us. Be right there. Just want to pull, that's our chat window so I can see if anyone comes. Hey guys, my name is Christopher Lengyel, retired Army veteran, and this is the Help Me PTSD talk show where we bring different professionals and subject matter experts right to you through YouTube, no matter where you're at in the world, to get the help that you need, or at least some resources to make those symptoms kind of dissipate and make life a little bit easier to go about living. Today's show is the first one we've done in a while, and I have a return guest, Mike Edwards. Mike, thanks for being here. Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, education, and kind of what you do here in the community in Arizona.
Well, thanks for having me back. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed the first time I was on. So about me, I've worked in community behavioral health about 13 years now. Most of those years have been as a clinician. My focus, I have like several focuses of trauma, addiction, and I also train foster parents on how to parent kids who've experienced trauma. I also train mentors for Future for Kids on how to mentor kids who've experienced trauma. So I have a lot of trauma in my background, but I've also, for the past couple of years, worked in the field of recovery.
Okay.
It's all tied together.
It connects. And that's, I think one of the reasons why I got into the counseling thing and kind of chose trauma is originally I went in, I had my bachelor's in professional counseling. I emphasized on substance abuse, but then kind of started leaning towards getting my certifications in trauma because there's like an 80% correlative rate to trauma and substance abuse. Mm-hmm. They kind of go hand in hand, and a lot of times substances are what people rely on to escape because they were already traumatized in some way. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest goals that I have here at Help Me PTSD is I try to break the stigma of people hear PTSD and automatically go and say military. And that's simply not the case. I think most people in their lives at some point experience a form of trauma. Mm-hmm. It's just a variety of that, from domestic violence, substance abuse. I've heard recently people are just starting to treat substance abuse like a traumatic experience because you're technically traumatizing your body. Car accidents, massive bee attacks, the list goes on how we can be traumatized. So today, Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about this environmental stress release model. I know you guys can't see what's written, so right after the show, I'm going to snap a picture of this. It'll be up on our Facebook page, Help Me PTSD, so that way you can kind of get a better look at it, but it's just up here for him to explain and teach some tools and techniques that he actually uses in his groups.
Yeah, so this is just up here because I like to point at things. Okay, so the environmental stress release model is a worksheet. It's a model, a comprehensive model on, and this is what the participant fills out, is this worksheet. Okay, and so what this does is helps bring awareness to the individual who is struggling. And what I mean by struggling is any uneasiness. So that we have certain like small events in life, like triggers, that might cause us to have fight, flight, or freeze reactions. For example, like a small event would be like getting cut off in traffic and then yelling or flipping off the driver that cut you off. Okay, all of these responses though are shaped by by our previous experiences and likely shaped because of what happened in childhood. Okay. So our stress response system gets wired at a very early age in our development, and we have our stress response system includes our fight, flight, freeze. So the purpose of this model is to teach people in great detail what is going on with them and why it happens. So the first part of the model is that we have these large events, these big events in life, and we were just talking a little bit about childhood trauma. Okay, so childhood trauma is going to include emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect. I have a list, and it'd be great if we could get this on your website as well, where that is the Adverse Childhood Experience Index. So it's an itemized list of 10 items that speak to adversity in childhood. You could have grown up with an abusive parent, witnessed domestic violence. You could have had a parent who suffered from a mental illness, an alcoholic parent. And so all of that creates stress in the home. And when you have stress in the home when we are a child, that affects normal neural development and forms our stress response system. Okay, so those are like the big events. Also though, big events would include like car accidents, going to war, perhaps other traumatic events like just loss in general, and those influence us. So what we do in this workshop is we first discuss and identify these big events in our life, all right? And then we start to break down what some of the triggers are. So now we're going to look at these small events, and I'm not minimizing it by saying it's a small event, okay, but comparatively, compared to like a death in the family, getting cut off in traffic is a small event, okay? But it's still a trigger, it's still going to cause some unease. So I kind of like to start the workshop off this way, and I just, let me ask you, what is something that would actually cause you to yell or snap?
Yeah, getting cut off in traffic. And recently in the heat, I don't know what it is about Arizona, but as soon as it gets hot, everyone's just agitated. So it's like people are driving fast, trying to get to where they need to go, and it's just chaotic. And I feel myself getting aggravated when people are flying by me going 90 miles an hour in a 65.
Right, yep. Cruising around at 80 in the fast lane if somebody's like behind you and they're like irritated that you're not going fast enough. That frustrates me.
Right.
I'm going 80, come on.
I'm already breaking the law, technically.
Yeah. Okay, so that causes you some frustration, some uneasiness. Okay.
Yes.
And would you like yell or?
Probably, yeah. I would yell. I guess like to myself, it's more like it's in the car. Like I know they can't hear me too, so I feel silly doing it. But it's like, come on, man. Like, what are you doing? That's literally my, it's like, what? Really? That's what, or that, like that kind of response to get to,
Okay. So you don't want to feel that way.
No.
Okay, that stress, because the moment you get cut off, there's the perception of a threat. And you get a jolt of cortisol and adrenaline because something's just happened in your environment that has threatened you. Okay? So you got to go into like a fight, flight, freeze type mode to protect yourself, and so you yell. It's like, hey, back off, driver. But you don't really say that. You're probably making some gesture.
There's probably some gestures. You could say that.
Yeah. Okay. So, and that's very common, and especially as the heat goes up. So what happens then is we get agitated, our system gets aroused, and now we're a little bit stressed. Okay. Now we're adults, and this happens. We take a few deep breaths and we calm down. Now, if we go back into our childhood, and if we grow up in a state of like arousal, where we're in a fear state often, we're going to have this stress eating away at our brain, and our body, and it's going to affect our brain functioning.
So when it comes to the childhood trauma, are you saying that for a child that has that situation that happens in their environment, maybe as a child it's, the alcoholic dad, or, they're stressed out all the time, that it takes longer for them to come back to a homeostasis balanced area?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So let's just say I'll try to draw this and illustrate it with this, my dry erase board. So this is our normal baseline right here. This is calm. Now let's just say that we get frustrated or aroused, and we don't have somebody in our life that we could talk to that's safe, that's going to help us like calm down and re-regulate. Okay, so this then, we get something in our, like dad comes home, slams the door, kid's heart rate elevates, his blood pressure, his respiration elevate, so now he's aroused, frustrated. Okay. Now, the kid might go isolate, he might go like slam the door himself, so he's up there. So he's going to come up here, and then eventually he's going to drop back down. And when he drops back down, he's not going to go back down to where he started.
Right.
Okay? He's going to come right here, where his blood pressure, his respiration, his heart rate is still increased.
So his new normal
new norm. Yeah, exactly.
So now and this is going to get into when we're talking, especially with childhood trauma, a lot of times, unfortunately, this is a very continual, sometimes daily, goes on for months and months and months, years sometimes, without even being noticed. Mm-hmm. So with this model of example, every time, so if a child gets traumatized, then again, and he goes back, and now the baseline is not, this isn't his new normal. Now I have an elevated heart rate, that is my new normal. If that trauma continues, is there a point in time where this just keeps going up and up and up?
Yeah, where they're just constantly aroused because they need to be primed to
this is where another interesting thing I've learned the other day. I don't want that to dry out. With compound trauma or compiled traumas is, if you visualize this thing where you're at the baseline of calm, then you, as a child, we're talking children, you're traumatized to a certain point, now your new normal's up here. This keeps going up and up, and eventually you will start seeing physical symptoms appear. And oftentimes that's when you start seeing those physical things, that's been going on for so long that now finally someone noticed it. So it's interesting, a good visual depiction of that. So let's go back to
let me come back to this checklist really fast, because this questionnaire is based on the Adverse Childhood Experience Study, and it's an item of 10. So if the higher you check off, the higher the number, the greater your risk factors are for everything, okay? But also like risk factors for suicide attempts, addiction, unwanted pregnancy, but also health issues.
Right.
So obesity, heart disease, it's intense stuff. So the more trauma, the more stress we're exposed to, the more damaging it is to like our brains and our bodies.
Okay. Let me just I just want to read some of the questions off of this. This is used in a lot of counseling practices for intake purposes when people go into a psychologist or a counselor and they're trying to figure out, how can we best help you. But this is an ACE score. This is prior to your 18th birthday. It asks questions like, does your parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you in a way that made you feel that you might be physically hurt? Did a parent grab you, slap, throw something at you, or ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured? It goes down to, did you ever feel that no one in your family loved you or thought that you were important or special? So they go through, there's about 10 questions with sub-questions in each one, and through answering these and thinking back, this is a tool that helps us counselors, coaches, really understand where we need to focus on when we're making those plan of actions and developing a model of healing that's catered specifically for you and your needs of what you experienced.
Once you get to 4 on this list, your life expectancy decreases about 22 years.
That's crazy. So if you're a 4 or above, okay. Now when you say 22 years off of life, is that if you never proactively go back and try to treat that?
Right.
Another thing I heard the other day is like when you talk about childhood trauma, and this was I run 2 support groups a month. Mike has his support groups too, which we'll talk about towards the end to let people know where those are at and how to get involved. But one of the things that blew my mind a couple weeks ago, I had a lady that, it's older people that are coming back and now are trying to process trauma that happened in their childhood. And it was interesting. So I always wondered, like, well, why now? As a coach, I'm sitting here thinking, it's like you went 55 years without it being a problem and what, why now. And for this one situation, and it kind of opened my eyes, put me in a different lens of perception. She said, I got abused when I was a child, and right now she has children, and one of her children is the same age as when she was abused. And she literally walked in the house one day and connected how old her child was, and it brought everything back up because it was the same age here. That's her daughter now. Even though she's not abusing her daughter or whatnot, it brought all those emotions up. So it's very interesting to see how easily the smallest thing of just like, your own child being a trigger, not because they did something, but just because of the time and place that you're in right now, and how old she was just resembled her going through that years and years and years ago.
So that would be an example of like a small event in life. Although it's not small,
No,
it's a big deal.
Right.
Okay, but just the age is a trigger.
Right.
And it's totally natural for that woman to be experiencing that. And she's definitely not alone. I've heard that often. Okay. So coming back to the model, the idea is to really explore and gain awareness into ourselves. And so we kind of list out like what our triggers are, and the most common trigger, and I've done this with like parents and kids, is being told no. Nobody likes to be told no, and when people are told no, that they have some type of response to it, where they get just a little frustrated, uneasy, or whatever it is. Okay, so that's the number one answer straight across the board, being told no. Traffic is up there always.
Right.
And then we get into like other events. Like, what's another event that would kind of frustrate you?
For not anymore, but I'll think of one in the past. When I was deployed to Afghanistan, one of the things that I could not stand is sometimes the people there, or general population, they just stare at you. And I'm talking, the look in their eyes is the most threatening look I've ever experienced, and I feel it literally, it feels aggressive, and they just peer at you. So when I came back, I'd be sitting at a stoplight, and it's like we're both turning left, but the guy across the street from me at a four-way stop is like just staring at me, and I'm sitting here about ready to jump in my car and be like, yo, what are you looking at?
Yeah.
Because you're about to get hit.
Absolutely.
So and it took me a while to realize, it's like, no, he's just literally right in front of me, and he's looking at me to see when I'm going to go so he can go.
Yeah.
And so, but it was like, because of my experience then, when it's like, getting stared at, and then like 20 minutes later, the same guy's shooting at you. Coming back here, it's like, I took offense to that, even though it wasn't a realistic, rational thought.
Yeah, so when you got triggered, you went into your brainstem. But it sounds like you've learned how to pull that thinking into the thinking part of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, and to process it and realize I'm here, I'm at an intersection, he's not staring at me, and you're able to ground yourself in the moment.
Yes.
And that takes a lot of practice, and that's like part of this model, is to kind of teach that awareness so we could ground ourselves.
Right.
So that's a great example.
And can I just another? I like to give a different example for what it might look like for someone else. I do this in my class a lot, and it is a grounding technique, especially with people that have anxiety going into public places. Crowds are an issue for a lot of people. One lady I explained this to, she was assaulted at a gas station, and now she can't. Every time she goes to a gas station, she starts freaking out. And so I said, well, what gas station did it happen at? And she's like, well, it was Circle K. And I was like, well, what gas station did you go to yesterday? QT. I said, so the first thing I would do is, let's learn, and okay, right now, I'm not at the same gas station that happened with. So right now, my irrational thought is, every time I go to a gas station, I'm going to be assaulted. I'm going to question, is that really true? Then I'm going to go to, well, I'm not at the same gas station I was at, so this gas station is probably nothing bad going to happen.
So you're jumping ahead in the model, but that's perfect, because there's a section specifically for thoughts.
So
you can identify your thoughts, what's going on.
Cool.
But for the example you're just using, it would be really common, I suspect, for her to be triggered like by the smell of gasoline.
Right. See. Yes.
And because smell is like the number one trigger for traumatic memories, and memories in general, but also traumatic memories, because it just gets in there really good. Okay, so with that said, some of those smaller triggers would be tone, body posture, like I said, smell, and being disrespected is a common answer.
Okay.
So it's like somebody just kind of speaking down to you.
Okay. Yeah. I see. Yeah.
Okay.
I can.
So the idea when I do this in a workshop is I'm pulling from the group, and they're kind of answering. They're
From
answering
their
the
own.
questions, yeah, but they're putting it out there to the group, and then the group is saying, hey, I relate this way, so that, and then they're putting it on the worksheet as well.
Okay.
Okay, so we list out these small events and these triggers, and then we move on to the identification phase. And this is a very important phase because there's a lot going on in our mind and body when we're triggered. Okay, so you just identified some thoughts that this woman may be having when she is at a gas station, but I don't want to start with thoughts. I want to start with emotions, and I start with I usually start. So cognitive behavioral therapists suggest that it is the thought, emotion, behavior. My school of thought is that we have a physical sensation first, then an emotion, and then we have a thought. But it could all happen like that.
Right. It's hard to.
It's really hard to.
And I guess in theory it can happen any which way,
Yes.
Like in any order, and sometimes. But okay.
Okay, and I'm not saying that CBT is wrong, because for some people it is going to be the thought, then the emotion, and then the behavior. I think people who have experienced a lot of trauma, though, especially what's considered like developmental trauma, and that is the exposure to a lot of stress in childhood, then they are likely to have like a physical response first, and that physical response is going to be the release of cortisol, and that cortisol and adrenaline is going to get your blood pressure up, your heart rate up, your respiration.
So can you just elaborate? Like I know everyone knows adrenaline. Mm-hmm. Can you explain maybe a little bit more about cortisol and what that does?
Yeah, just what I just described. So cortisol is the stress hormone, and it's responsible really with the adrenaline of kicking our system into gear. So it's a part of our sympathetic nervous system, connected to our brainstem. So if we have the perception of a threat, so one of these smaller triggers, then an alarm bell, the amygdala will sound, and then that's going to send a signal to two adrenal glands that sit at the top of our kidneys, and then that's going to send out burst of, and then depending on the size of the threat
is going to be how much response that's
the
given.
Perception of the threat is the key.
Okay.
So if we perceive the threat to be large, then we're going to get more. Now I have a little bit of stress before we do these videos. Okay, and that's totally natural.
Right.
So it's like how I'm able to manage it. Now, if I wasn't able to manage it, it could be the stress would keep fueling,
right?
And the next thing you know, I might be shaking,
right?
Or I just refuse to participate,
right?
Which would be a flight response.
Okay.
Because I'm not willing to. It's not like I don't want to say I'm not willing. I'm not capable.
Right now, right?
Yeah.
No, that's. Oh, excuse me. I don't know why I'm yawning. I slept great last night too.
Okay.
One of the things I like about where this is going is, in my experience in my studies, when a traumatic event happens, this flood of, like you said, cortisol and adrenaline, it just punched its way, making connections between all those feelings, thoughts, and that event very strong, almost like a floodgate. And when you're going through different coaching or counseling, the goal is to take all of that information and start narrowing that pathway back down to a reasonable level, or create a new pathway so that you're just, there's no chance of this trigger happening and it resulting in that, and it's just alleviating the triggers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we're kind of working our way all in that direction.
Okay.
You're absolutely
So that's
right.
okay.
That's kind of the whole point. So once we become aware, we have a choice. I look at it as a responsibility. Mm-hmm. However, it's a defense, though, to kind of maybe stonewall or to block some of these hurtful feelings.
Right.
So and it's natural to go into our defenses because that's how we've survived.
Okay. So let's finish this, and then
Okay. Because this actually takes a while. When I do it as a workshop, if I have a group of 2 to 3 people, it usually takes about an hour and a half, but we'll be able to get through it.
Okay.
Okay, quickly. All right. So what we have, something has caused you to be uneasy in the environment. Now, let's just say you feel a little bit angry or frustrated, and you didn't necessarily start out feeling angry. You might have started feeling irritated or annoyed. I like to think of like anger on a spectrum, where on one side you have like irked, and then the other side you have enraged. So if you're irked, you're still you're able to think and you're able to process with your prefrontal cortex. If you're totally enraged, then you're just in your brainstem. You're not
act without thinking.
Yeah.
And what that looks like for, like, within the family system, when you get to that anger point, that might look like a physical outrage. It might look like someone trying to hit or not thinking. That's when you get into very damaging aspects of how PTSD can come and just tear families apart, because they don't know how to recognize this symptom. They don't know how to recognize anything. They go from 0 to 100 miles an hour, which happens a lot with us veterans. Yeah. And now all of a sudden, they're verbally attacking, they're cursing, they're going at it, which is very hurtful for the person on the other side. And the worst part about all of that situation is probably about a day and a half later, they start thinking about, oh my gosh, I did that.
Because they probably carried that cortisol in their system for that day and a half. We carry it in our system for hours after the event, but depending on how much cortisol we have released in our system, it could sit in our for probably up to 48 hours.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. Okay. So
and that's how that baseline raises.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So let's continue on.
All right. So you have something that's caused you some uneasiness. You have some emotion behind it, and now, where do you feel the physical sensations in your body? So when you become uneasy about something, where do you feel it?
For me, it depends on what the situation is, but for me, it's either in my stomach or in my chest.
Okay, very common. 2 very common. I also hear jaw, shoulders, neck, teeth. Tension areas. With kids I've worked with, they would feel, and this is what some people would say, I first know I'm angry when I realize I'm clenching my jaw. When they first realize they're angry, okay, is what they're saying. Now kids would say it's when my fists are clenched. Because the cortisol has been released, and now you're getting tense. Your body is tensing up. You're in that fight mode. So that's good awareness right there. You want to be able to know that, because if you know that, then you could do something about it. Right. So then the next piece is what you hit on earlier. You have the thoughts. What's going on in our head? So, if somebody cuts me off in traffic, it's like, this always happens on the 101. Every time I drive. And now I'm using these always, like,
the all or nothing statements.
Exactly, right.
What else? I forget the other name for it. Yeah, it's the all or nothing and the definitive statements that 99.999% of the time are just completely illogical.
Yeah, so the cognitive behavioral therapist is going to say this is a cognitive distortion. It's not always, or a cognitive distortion or an irrational thought, because it's not always. It's not 100% of the time.
No, but...
And so the thoughts are really important, because now in this workshop, as we start talking about the thoughts, I'm going to be able to get to your belief systems. Right. And as we talk about the thoughts, I'm going to be able to give you tools to how to argue with your thoughts. I'm going to teach you how to, to identify the thought. Ask yourself, is this a rational thought? Yeah. Okay. Is there any evidence to support this thought? Does this thought help me feel the way I want to feel?
See, now that's changing from CBT to DBT.
Right.
Okay. A little bit of dialectical behavior there, and questioning those irrational thoughts. So it's like, pay attention, because the biggest part about being able to heal from your trauma is just simply knowing how to do it. Mm-hmm. You can take some of these lessons and practice. It takes a while to practice. I always tell people, did it take you overnight to get in shape? Did it take,
Right.
you know, if you were a musician, did you learn how to perfect and play the piano performance-wise in a week? No. When you're dealing with your brain, it's even more complex than some of these other activities or trades that you can learn. So it takes repetitive, consistent, continual work, and over time, what you're looking for is these response mechanisms to become automatic. Whereas first, when I started doing some of my coping mechanisms, I literally carried a 3x5 note card in my pocket that literally said, breathe, 30 seconds in, 45 out. Okay? Gave myself another one of my other tools. And for a while, it literally I had to remember.
And if I know that's your model,
Right.
we're not going to be able to process through it. In this workshop, but the individual will walk away with tools on how to be better. Because how do you combat a false belief system?
You have to prove it otherwise.
You have to, you got to argue with it. It's like it doesn't, I am worthy, I am lovable, I am enough. And we gotta really challenge our thinking, and then we gotta experience it. We gotta experience being loved. We gotta experience being lovable. We have to really recognize, hey, I am doing enough. I am good enough.
Right.
You know, and there's things that we could do daily when we get to the prevention portion of this model that will help us with that. You know, for example, journaling. You know, journaling, writing out. They say writing out a gratitude list with just 3 items a day for like 21 days will actually change the chemistry in your brain, and you will be more positive.
So that looks like every day finding 3 positive things that happened or that you felt?
And then journal about that too, yeah. So that's all like from positive psychology. Seligman wrote this book, Flourish, that really goes into a lot of detail on that, and I recommend that. But okay, so I addressed the belief systems.
Right.
Okay, and then where the model gets his name is underneath belief systems is the environment.
Right.
So let's just say you get in an argument with your spouse.
Okay.
Maybe there's some stress, and I don't know what you guys argue about, but a lot of couples fight about money, and let's just say that there's some financial struggles,
right.
And there's an argument pursues, and your kids are in the other room.
Right.
Now, if the kids hear that argument, it could stress them out.
Right.
If this happens a lot, let's just say, you're stressed out about money, so you start drinking, and then the arguments become more belligerent. The kids in the other room are going to hear it. So the stress coming off from the parents is going to hit the kids.
Yes.
And they could be upstairs and not a part of it at all. It's, oh, mom and dad are fighting again.
Right.
I'm going to turn up my radio. But what's happened is they get that jolt of cortisol, yeah,
and adrenaline, and now their coping mechanism was, let me close the door and isolate myself so I don't have to experience that.
Yeah. Okay. So that has happened. That there's a lot to what's going on once we're triggered and once we're aroused, and so our defense mechanism, our defense system, then kicks into gear.
Right.
So we don't want to feel that way. So I break our defenses into fight, flight, and freeze. And so, the common fight defenses are yelling, posturing, throwing things, until, you could end up hitting.
Right.
So those are common.
Another defense mechanism that I've seen, it's attitude. And it's not how you say something. The best way I can explain this is it's the accentuated.
Yes. So that's a small event right there. Absolutely. That's a trigger right there. Somebody sighing like that.
And
that's a great
my mom does this all the time, and I tell her, I was like, what you're saying is fine. It's all the stuff after when I say something, and it's your first. Tell me something that you did this last week, Mike. Just something work related that you were proud of that you did.
Training for Future for Kids.
Well, that's okay. I'm glad you're doing well. So but I want to give that example.
Mom.
And it's like, so it's those small things can be just as hurtful
Absolutely, yeah.
right.
This false belief system. So it's very powerful.
So okay, so while we're on that topic, what I'm gonna give you a tough situation. If you had that, they're not willing to make a change, or they're not willing to. It's like, I'm not gonna forget about my trauma. That never. I mean, it's always gonna be there. What happened July 19th on 2010 is always gonna be there. How do you work with someone that is almost holding on to those things, and they're just not letting that go? And is there a way that you can? What ways do you help people get to the point where it's like, okay, you got two choices. You can either let this control your life, run your life, and it's going to be miserable, which you're already here, so you obviously know there's something going on, or you can take heed to advice and counsel and coaching and start implementing these things. Have you ever had a client or something where it's and how do you I mean, the worst case scenario is like, okay, I'm not the person to help you, and find it otherwhere. But when they're on that teetering, like, if you just work a little bit, how do you get someone from the I'm holding on to my traumatic event and I'm holding on to the resentment I'm keeping. It's almost, I feed myself off of being able to feel depressed, sad, and unlovable.
So they're probably getting something out of that feeling, some type of defense. I am very strength-based, so I explore strengths, and I would never encourage or even suggest that you could forget about the trauma, but you could. It doesn't have to define you. And I would explore, it's like, well, how come what brings you in today? What are some of your goals for being in?
Right.
And use some motivational interviewing techniques to help them find the motivation, their own motivation, to change. Because we have to want to change.
Yes.
We have to have some motivation. And we get so used to sitting in our crap that it becomes normal.
Right.
And it almost becomes scary to leave,
go
because
the
you've been so it's like, so what is it doing for you? Is there a way that we could like maybe transfer that into
a positive
another,
right? And I guess the other issue I've run into with some of my coaching clients is when we start getting into the re-imaging, re-imaging. That's I can't say that. Taking a event and now associating in a different experience with what had happened, because we're not in the same place, we're not in the same time. And I've gotten some friction with, well, you're trying to tell me to pretty much lie to myself.
I wouldn't. I would suggest that they are stronger because of the trauma, even if they don't realize it yet. So there's a concept that's called post-traumatic growth, and that we come out of on the other side of trauma with strengths that we would not have had otherwise. We just discover pieces of ourselves that we would not have discovered otherwise. And it might be hard to get there. Peter Levine does, like one of the renowned psychologists that focuses on the body and somatic work, says that, my favorite quote by him is, trauma is hell on earth, trauma healed is, I'm forgetting it, is a gift. And it truly is. It's a gift. Once we get to the other side of trauma, we are stronger for it. We are better for it. But we get so stuck in it, it's hard to see.
Right. And I guess it's like over a certain, and I guess I deal with this because a lot of my people are older and it's dealing with childhood trauma. So it's like they've been stuck in this. It might be 20 years that they've had this belief system.
You could be stuck in like a victim mentality as opposed to a survivor mentality.
Right.
Where a part of their persona, their identity is from getting maybe some sympathy, getting some attention from by telling their story. Okay, but they're telling their story not for the sake of healing, but for the sake of getting attention. It's more of a defense mechanism.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
No, that makes sense.
Now we need to be able to tell our story. We need to be able to own our story.
Yes.
We don't need to necessarily dwell on our story. We don't need to have our story own us.
Right.
Okay, but we need to own our story. Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense. Yeah. No, it does. So back to, we're in the defenses.
So we're in our defenses. So we have our fight, flight, freeze defense. Flight defenses would include, running away from the problem without coming back to resolve it. It could be using substances. freeze defenses. You have now freeze. I love to talk about freeze because freeze is your classic deer in headlights or your war veteran who is having a flashback. Okay, but freeze. So when people are having a flashback, they're disassociating.
Okay.
And freeze could also look like disassociation in a different way. So right now, if you were just like to start to get really animated with me, stand on the chair and start threatening me, and if I could have a freeze response where I just kind of shift, I just kind of just go here, okay,
right,
okay, that's a type of freeze response.
Okay.
Now I could also have a response to where you say something that's kind of insulting to me. Like, you don't really know what you're talking about, Mike. This is the last time you're going to be on the show, okay? And so that's an event for me. That's a small event, and it could activate my false belief system that I'm not good enough. And I could spend the rest of the day thinking of a comment or things I could have done differently.
I should have said this. And...
So I'm obsessing.
Okay.
And obsessing is a form of disassociation. And so what's happened is my dorsal vagal system, which is separate from my sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight responses,
right,
kind of activates, and now I'm just spinning, and that's where I just get stuck.
Right.
And so freeze could look at a couple different ways.
Yeah.
It could be the deer in headlights, but I'm just not present in my body. I'm fuming on something in the past, and that's what trauma does. Trauma transports us into the past,
yeah.
And what we have to do is to ground ourselves into the future. And this model really helps with that because we could gain awareness into first our triggers, what's going on with us, what our defense mechanisms are, and then what to do about it. And that leads us next to the next category, which is our intervention, the coping skills. So what do we do to calm ourselves down? What do we do to re-regulate? And I teach, and I did this at the last time we met, is I teach the power of the pause. And the power of the pause is taking a breath, because when we take a deep breath, then we are reducing the amount of cortisol in our body, and then some self-talk. And when we do some self-talk, we're using the thinking part of our brain.
Yeah.
So we're moving that thought like upstairs from like the brainstem, which is downstairs here, to the upstairs portion, which is the prefrontal cortex. I take a breath. Okay, I'm kind of reducing the stress, and now I'm thinking, I got this. You know, you're a nice guy. You don't really need to insult me.
This also plays into when I was at an event a couple months ago, and I met a Native American healer. He's got all of his degrees, master's level counselor and everything. And I asked him, I said, hey, is there any words of advice you could give me, just starting out? And he looked at me, he's like, forget everything you learned in school. And I'm like, huh? He's like, what I'm about to tell you, he's like, this is all you need to know. And it plays into a lot of these different things. He said, stop, look, and listen. If anyone that watches this, if you can tell me something in the comments that you can do in life without doing one of those three, I'll be impressed, because no one has been able to yet. But this is, it's again, the stopping, I breathe. Now, if it's a environment you're in, you're going to be looking and assessing that and listening and going through that self-dialogue. So I like things that, go hand in hand with that. And I thought of the stop, look, and listen method when you talk about pause. That just made me think about that.
Yeah. So the power of the pause is the self-talk and the deep breathing, but other skills would depend on the individual. It could be calling somebody on the phone, it could be listening to music, it could be going for a walk. There's things that we could do that will help calm the system down. Now, the theory that I really buy into is that, and this is from Bessel van der Kolk, he wrote the book The Body Keeps the Score. Healing happens in the context of relationship. So we need relationships to heal and to move forward. As mammals, we're built for connection.
Yes.
And so if we have safe people that we could talk to, like if I'm frustrated, I could call you up and express to you like what's going on with me, and you could stay calm, then it's all good. But if you let's get revenge, let's go out that dude,
let's go out and get that guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Slash his tires.
That's not helping.
No.
So So relationship is key
Right.
to all of this. Okay, so now let's just say that where would you want to use the power of the pause in this model? I recommend, or I ask this question every time I do it, and so it's like, you could use the power of the pause after you've been triggered, like immediately after somebody like cuts you off and try. And I have done this. I've really worked on how I handle traffic. Is where the moment like I'm cut, I just take a breath. It's like,
Right.
they're obviously in a hurry. Okay. Now of course there's been times when I've kind of, what happened was I hit my horn one time so hard I hurt my wrist. And I realized it just sprained it, just kind of dinged it, you know. It's like it was sore for
Right.
a while. I'm like, I'm hurting myself because of what that person did,
Right.
and I'm not gonna do that anymore. And it's like I talk about the power of the pause all the time. This is an opportunity to use it. So I just really started and I would have trained myself to take the breath, and then to do some self-talk. They're in a hurry, you know. Maybe I could just cruise in the middle lane. I don't need a hurry.
Right.
And so really, I spend more time in the middle lane than yeah.
So let's do this. Let's do like a role play scenario with you. We'll say you're the coach, I'm the person. I'm gonna come up with an event, and then you're gonna walk through this, so that way they can get a start to finish what that looks like.
We gotta get to the two other pieces.
Okay.
So let's just say you've used the power of the pause.
Okay.
And you used it the moment you saw the event, or the moment you feel angry, the emotion of anger. So if you like start to feel angry, you can take a breath. If you feel it physically, you take a breath and use the self-talk. You listen to your iPod or whatever, or the moment you have the thought, like this is, you know, I'm the thought that this always happens to me, or whatever those type of thoughts are, those negative thoughts. You could then argue with it and take a breath, do some other self-talk. So you could use the power of the pause pretty much anywhere, even after you've started yelling.
Right.
It's like, oh my, I am yelling. Why am I getting loud?
Right. And then the other thing is, like, if you've even gotten past the point where you already went to 100 miles an hour, remember this tool that we talked about, this thing right here. I'm gonna pull this back up, where your flat line's here, then something happens, then something really happens, and then when you calm back down, you're here. If you never use that power of the pause, once you're right here, if you then take the time to make sure you always go back down.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it's after the whole cycle of event happened, you can still use the pause after you've had an anger outburst or whatnot later on, to make sure you're taking that self-care
That's right.
aspect into account.
Yeah. So we're moving towards self-care and prevention. So let's just say you've used the power of the pause, and you've managed to stay calm. You're going to get something out of it. Now, usually pride, you might feel good. Hey, I handled that situation really well.
Right.
If you're a youth, hey, there's some maturity to that. If you're a youth or an adolescent, your brain is actually getting a huge reward, because now you're developing a stronger neural pathway of being calm and being able to calm down and regulate, as opposed to reacting.
Okay.
Okay, that's key. Another reward for like parents staying calm would be the environment is calm, and that's a huge benefit. And I'm going to talk more about that in just a second. Okay, so now we get to the prevention piece. So there's things that we could do daily that are going to help us stay calm. And the best thing that we could ever do for ourselves is exercise and then meditate. Those two things are great for our brain. But we could journal. We could have meaningful relationships and conversations with people. And the more we do this stuff, the more calm we are. That's our more natural state. So then the moment we become aroused, the moment we have some thought that is a negative thought, we can identify it and handle it much quicker.
Right. So in essence, what I'm picking up is that if we perfect our ability to be calm, we're giving ourselves the opportunity to notice something not being calm sooner than if we weren't doing any self-care mechanisms in the first place.
Absolutely, yeah. Because if we're not taking care of ourselves, and this happens with me. If I'm not meditating, if I'm not exercising, I might not notice right away that I'm a little bit more stressed, but a few more days into it, and then maybe something happens at work, and wow, and then I've snapped at somebody.
Yep.
Oh geez, I am stressed.
Yeah.
And what's going on? What am I doing differently? It's typically what I'm not doing.
And no, that makes sense.
Okay, so let's go ahead and work through it with your example.
Okay. So beyond doing this, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and one of my triggers is, I'm gonna say this. This last week, I had 3 meetings, and these were people that I know if I would have met, we would have done great things, and all of them just didn't show up, and I feel like a failure. I feel like no one takes me seriously. My whole business plan is just wrong because no one took me seriously this week. No one showed up to my meetings, and no one wants to work with me.
So okay, that's the event. Is that they didn't show
They didn't
for
show
me.
up.
They didn't show for me. So that's the event, and then the emotion is what?
I feel like a failure. I feel like I'm not good enough.
Okay, so that's like the thought. What's like the emotion?
The emotion.
Is it sad, disappointed,
Disappointed, frustrated, and angry.
All 3 of those.
All 3 of them.
Good. So and you feel that in your chest.
Yes, it's just all right here and very in the face.
Okay.
I feel like because when I get angry, I just everything's
Okay. Yep, and that looks really intense with your beard.
I know.
So full. Yeah. It's intimidating. Okay. All right. So then, the thoughts are you're a failure, is what you're saying.
My business isn't good enough.
Okay.
No, it's not going to succeed. So because my business isn't a good idea, they didn't meet with me.
Okay. And that's connected to some type of belief system. And what would you say that you have the belief system connected?
Every time I try to move forward in my company, it never works out.
So it never works. That's more of a thought. With the belief system, possibly I'm not good enough.
I could see it's like I'm just not good enough.
I'm not good enough. Okay.
I'm not smart enough.
Okay. All right. And then, so what is the reaction? What's the defense mechanisms? Fight, flight.
It's the defense mechanism for me is more of like I don't know if it is flight or I guess it's flight because I just leave.
Okay.
And I'm just gonna be away from them, and I never want to even give them a second chance.
Okay. Okay, so you're avoiding.
And I'm avoiding. Yes, I'm gonna avoid them.
All right. And then what coping skills work for you?
Well, usually when I play a lot of music, so after this happened, I came home and I just played music for 2 hours.
How'd that work?
And it felt better afterwards.
Okay.
Calmed me down, and it made me think maybe I started thinking like, how many times have I not made an appointment, or I've called and said, there's a family emergency. Maybe I don't know the whole situation.
Very good. So now you're doing what you could have done, like in the identification phases where you're arguing with those thoughts. So you're getting a flood of negative thoughts coming in, and you can shut those down using the power of the pause in the moment with those thoughts. It's like, is this an accurate thought? Is there any evidence to support this thought? Does this really always happen? Is my business model, if you really honestly look at it, and of course we could try to find all the negatives to support, but if we really argue with these thoughts, we could find arguments against them.
Right.
To support like all the good work that you're doing, Chris. You do a lot of work in the community, okay? But we forget that sometimes when these negatives happen because they stand out and they feel and they hurt.
Right.
And so my suggestion would be to take that breath and it's like to really explore what you did after you played the music.
Right.
What's going on? Yeah. And if business is hard, I get it. And sometimes we have to adapt to survive. It's like, so maybe I do need to rethink things or retool things. Resiliency is the key to overcoming trauma.
Right.
We have the ability to bounce back, not just survive or bounce back. We have the ability to bounce forward.
And also, disclaimer, that's not really anything that happened last week. That was just my example of walking through this process, so you guys could see what that might look like for.
I've actually had that happen before.
Right. I have too, but not last week, and I don't care about it that much. Anyways, that's my phone going off in the other room that I didn't turn on silent. It'll be all right.
It's okay.
It's out of I hope I don't get in trouble because I don't know if I have a license to use that noise. Anyways, so I'll just wait. Okay. So anyways, that was an example of what all of this might look like when you're sitting down with him in his coaching sessions or attending his group. I love that model.
One last thing.
So go ahead.
I put prevention underneath event, the big events, intentionally, because if we are practicing prevention, the chances of us passing some of this crap on to the next generation and giving them adverse childhood experiences has decreased. Okay, so if we're taking care of ourselves, our kids are going to be better off for it.
Yes, and this is, I heard another thing recently, some interesting information is that when you go through a healing process and you heal yourself, you're not only healing yourself, but you're healing like 3 to 4 generations before you. And you're putting in a lot of positive work for if you do have kids. If you're, I have 3 children, and I do my best to maintain that calm, serene environment, because I've learned over time that if I raise my voice and yell, they still do the same mistake next week. So yelling didn't work. I don't spank because that doesn't work either. Never have. I've got spanked when I was a kid and didn't like it. So when I had my kids, I was like, I'm just not going to do that. But it does. So as soon as I put in my work and I stay with my meditation, I'm taking care of myself, and I'm able to maintain my calm and center. I've noticed a direct correlation with now my children in the way they approach situations between themselves and between other people has been able to be calm, collective, and serene. And that's nothing that I said to them, that's nothing I taught them. It's literally just
you teach them by modeling.
By modeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like the do as I say, not as I do. I permit do as I do. And I try to stay focused in that manner too. So I've seen that be a big help in my household.
Yeah, that's great.
So let's see. We are coming up on the end of our hour. Okay. So you're gonna come back. You see, he has a lot of good information. I love having Mike on the show. Thank you for being here. We both have support groups. Mine are sponsored, and they're more continual maintenance of a community of support. I believe his are.
So mine are more psychoeducation and process, and I do them at Edgy Creating Alternatives. It's a gallery in Mesa, and what we do is right now the group is thriving, overcoming adverse experiences.
Nice.
So we're really going into some of the deeper work, and what I like about doing the groups at a gallery is that. We hold an event after the completion of group, and for this one, and this will be my second annual Thrivings, Overcoming Adverse Experience. At the first Thrivings, I invited people to come and speak about how they are stronger because they've overcome trauma. And it was really a very powerful night. I had a band there, I got art from people who had experienced trauma and kind of, just tattooed the walls with it.
Nice.
And so we're going to do that again, but this is the first time where I'm going to walk it through like with a group. And I just did this model
cool.
With a different theme, and that theme was owning your shadow, where I took a Jungian approach to treatment, where we really explored the darker or the less desirable traits that we have, shined a light on them with our strengths,
right,
and then integrated some of those darker traits into us. So we got to be aware of it. If we're not aware of it, then
we can't change it.
Exactly, and it will manifest in other ways.
And that's so. How if someone's interested in attending your group to get involved with what you do, how do they do that? Can you tell them again where it's at and when it is?
So the group is every Wednesday from 7 to 8:30, and then they just need to call me. So Mike Edwards, 480-646-7000, and we can work out the details. Yeah,
and if you're interested, you can either message right here on the YouTube. You can hit up Help Me PTSD Facebook page. You can even message helpmeptsd.org, say, hey, I saw your video, I want to get in touch with Mike. I will forward the email to you and kind of tag you in it if you're interested in that. The only other things that we've got going on, as of right now, we're starting a whole new series of live stream videos between now and we're going all the way through December. So It's August, September, October, November, December, almost 5.5 months. Every week we're going to have a new professional subject matter expert for a treatment or healing modality that can help you heal from your trauma. This week was Mike with what he does with his groups here. Thank you again for being on the show.
My pleasure.
For Help Me PTSD groups, we are the first and third Wednesday of the month. It's free to come. It's a community of support. Those are located at 710 West Elliott off of Kyrene and Elliott here in Tempe, Arizona. Next week's show is going to have a lady named Laura. She is the owner of the True Rest Spa out in Gilbert. It's float tanks, self-deprivation tanks. So we're going to do an episode on how that can be used to heal and regain your composure by depriving the senses and really focusing on meditation for the body, mind, and soul. So until next time, thank you. Make sure you subscribe, and if you have any shows or comments or an idea for us to cover, let us know. Email helpmeptsd.org and we'll make that happen. So again, Mike, thank you so much,
thank you.
and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Okay, cool.